In this interview, we are going to be discussing uranium with the one and only uranium insider, Justin, who is now a regular back on the show. So we're going to be breaking all into the uranium market, his predictions for 2021. So give us a comment down below and let us know your price predictions for uranium spot price right there down below. If you haven't yet, hit the like button on this side right over there. Hit the like button on this side and please enjoy this video. Special shout out to our official channel sponsor, Vizsla Resources, one of my favorite silver and gold stocks. So thank you, Vizsla, for being the channel sponsor. And I hope you enjoyed this video on uranium with the one and only Uranium Insider.
Yeah, how are you?
Doing good. So what's going on right now? We're kind of still in that $30 limbo for spot price.
Yep.
Kind of been hovering around for a while, and in the equities, some of them starting to have some price corrections. What's going on, Mr. Insider?
Yeah, that was a pretty good, very brief summary. I mean, the uranium price hasn't moved very much. It's still sitting around $30. Where it's been for a month and a half or longer, actually. But I think back about a month and a half because that's when the sector just went nuts while the spot price didn't really move. So kind of as predicted, without that underlying spot price really starting to tick up, some of the stocks you're seeing a little bit of profit taking, but it hasn't been that bad. It's been as expected, really. Some of these things are pretty overextended, and a nice little correction, a nice little rest break would be good. But essentially what's going on is there's not a lot of supply, but there's really not a lot of demand in the spot market at the moment. I don't know if that has to do with a seasonality piece that we're still kind of waiting to get through the presidential election inauguration, official closure of all of that for the U.S. utilities to make some more decisions. Or if, it's almost like it's kind of a standoff where the utilities know that there's some purchasing that needs to happen. They also know that Cameco and Kazatomprom are needing to do some spot market purchasing as well. The two biggest producers, which is wild. So it's kind of like everybody's waiting for the first person to jump in before they all jump in. That's kind of the feeling I'm getting right now with the spot market.
Who's going to jump in first?
I honestly think Cameco is going to probably accumulate what they can as quietly as they can.
Why quietly?
Yeah, but quietly. I'm sorry?
Why quietly?
Well, because they still benefit from purchasing at lower prices because they're fulfilling long-term contracts at higher prices with the purchased uranium.
Got it.
So the lowest price they can get in their purchasing, the better. And if they come in heavy with large volumes and short delivery times, that will force the price up, and considering they need to buy somewhere around, depending on how long Cigar stays down, but even assuming Cigar was in production for the whole year, they still need between 10 and 12 million pounds from the spot market. So right now that's an additional 750,000 pounds per month with Cigar down, which we think will be down probably at least 2 or 3 months. So let's put that at 12 to 14 million pounds, let's say, for 2021 for Cameco's purchasing needs. And our kind of rough numbers for Kazatomprom is somewhere similar, maybe a little bit less. They're going to need somewhere to the tune of around 10 million pounds based on our predictions of their supply impacts from the COVID closures last year. So I think Cameco is going to be buying. In fact, they might already be in low volumes, but I think they're going to try to grab what they can without moving the market up, and let the utilities and the traders, potentially Kazatomprom, and eventually maybe hedge funds do the dirty work and move the price for them. That'd be my prediction.
What have you heard from these hedge funds? I think I've said to you, if you or I were billionaires, multi-billionaires, I'd probably be dragging you out of your house to go front this market right now because of the opportunity. I mean, what have you heard on that front?
Very little. That type of information is not going to leak out very easily. I I can make certain informed assumptions based on what I perceive to be some institutional buying of the sector over the past 6 weeks based on the volumes. And based on kind of that initial trigger, in my opinion, from that first week in December, the bear traps report that went out from Larry McDonald that goes to a largely institutional audience. That was kind of like the trigger that hit all that volume. Moving into the sector, I mean, we've seen more than $100 million come into URA. We've seen URNM now at $60 million assets under management, and URA is now at close to 300 million AUM, where it was just over 100 million in the summer of last year. There's a lot of money that came into these big funds, and they just purchase indiscriminately. Money flows into the ETF, they buy the shares of their underlying holdings, at market. So, but the idea broadly is that the institutions will scoop up equities, then the producers will grab what they can, and then the institutions will come in and do the dirty work to move the price up, therefore lifting their equity holdings in the process. I mean, that's kind of the whole rough idea. This was lined out also in that article that was reposted to Zero Hedge, the article that went out to the Bear Traps report, which is a must read. I know we covered this the last time we chatted, but definitely if anybody hasn't read that, go back. December 3rd or 4th, Friday is when it came out. But that's kind of roughly what we're possibly seeing the beginning stages of, and what we'd like to see confirmation of this year.
If you're a betting man, where would you see the price? Where would you see the spot price having the potential to get to? Or do you think that we can have a whole nother year of no movement?
This year, or just in general?
Yeah, this year and this year.
I think we'll breach last year's highs. I think we'll get into the high 30s, if not low 40s, by the end of the year. I think it's just going to take Cameco and Kazatomprom, meeting their needs in the spot market, which I believe is going to come probably later this quarter, at least to begin with. So I think we're kind of seeing just this lull at the moment, and getting through the holidays, getting through the presidential election, getting through all of that, and moving on to kind of, okay, here's where we're at. The good news is there's just fantastic fundamentals behind everything, and we see that there's support on both sides of the aisle for nuclear now, which is astonishing. But yeah, I think high 30s, low 40s by the end of the year would be a conservative, realistic estimate.
So, when you say the supply and demand fundamentals, are exciting to you right now, what do you find right now most exciting and most compelling?
Right now, something that's really interesting that's coming up within the past week or two is there's kind of this energy crisis happening in Japan, where they're having blackouts during a very an unusually cold winter, and they're having trouble getting the natural gas shipped in time to keep the plants running. They're running at basically at peak capacity for the nat gas plants that have largely replaced the nuclear that they closed down after Fukushima. So that's an interesting piece. I don't know how much of a long-term catalyst it is. It really depends on if this current energy crisis hurries along the process that's already started, almost a decade ago now, of restarting power plants. So they closed down all of them after Fukushima, 53 reactors. 9 have been restarted. There's about a dozen, if I recall correctly, that are in process. So going through the regulations, doing all the safety upgrades, getting all the legal approvals from whatever prefecture they're in. But right now there's increasing chatter around bringing nuclear back more substantially and faster, with the potential even of building new plants. So it's really great to see that shift in sentiment. And that's not really, that's sort of a supply and demand thing. Like, it's positive for demand, but at the same time, it's assumed that they're still sitting on a pretty good chunk of inventory. Not a lot of that has come into the market because a lot of that was held as fabricated fuel, which is reactor specific. It's not something that really you sell back into the market because it's specific to each individual reactor. But the good thing is that whatever inventories they have in the form of U308, or more likely UF6, converted uranium, they're much less likely to come into the market. So, for example, Mike and Tim from Sachem Cove in their supply-demand modeling, they model out an estimated 5 million pounds of U3O8 equivalent coming into the market from Japan. And even they say they believe that's way higher than the actual amount. But it's still assumed that Japan has been dripping pounds into the market, maybe a couple million pounds a year over the past, a handful of years. And probably was more than that right after the closures. But with this potential expansion of restarts and even new builds would be incredible, and would likely mean that very little, if any, uranium would come into the market from Japan further. So that's an interesting development. Yeah.
What type of effect would that have on the overall market, on equities for us as an investor, on spot price, on whatever, if this energy issue continues to be one and they say, look, we've got to get this going, and they kind of make a big announcement and push to get them all back up and going again? What would happen?
I think it could have a pretty substantial effect on investor sentiment, more so than it would have on a structural effect on the supply chain.
Got it.
I think it would have a bigger effect on equities. You have, like folks like Rick Rule, who's been saying forever that the Japan restarts is kind of the thing that he's watching for to really trigger the bull market. And at this point, we kind of believe that, while we love Rick, I don't really think the Japan restarts is all that important to the overall bullish investing thesis, looking out, 3 to 5 years, whatever it might be. But I think that that news would spread quickly, and I think that it would be just another positive sentiment boost. I don't think it would be a rocket ship to the moon upon that announcement, but I think it would be just yet another piece to add to the pile of positive fundamental support for the entire sector.
It seems like we're maybe we have another flash crash in the stock market or something, but it seems like we're headed towards a next level of a bubble and everything. Where do you see uranium falling at year-to-date performances compared to other commodities, compared to tech stocks, compared to crypto? How do you see the potential and the performance of uranium equities in 2021?
I think it's going to be good overall. It's difficult to gauge reaction of uranium equities with a broad market sell-off. I think the theory all along has been, and I kind of stick with that and continue to agree with that it really depends on the spot price movement. I think if the spot price is moving up, I think that the broad market can do whatever the broad market's doing, and uranium equities would at least hang on, if not continue to move. And it depends on how much it's moving and how frequently it's moving. The previous bull market, the spot price was just didn't stop going up. It just did not stop. I mean, it was week over week over week over week, and it would rest for a month and it would just keep going. There's very few pullbacks on the actual price of the commodity. And not that I'm expecting a repeat necessarily of that, but I think fundamentals be damned if the spot price is moving, and macro influence from the broad market. But if the spot price is stagnant and the broad market moves down, I mean, we saw it. That was last week, I think. The Dow Jones was down 1.5 or 2% or something like that, and uranium stocks got hit. It's to be expected that most stocks will kind of move in lockstep with the broad market, generally speaking, most of the time. But I do also think at the same time that with, kind of like a tech stock bubble, that we'll see some sort of rotation, out of growth into value, some sort of rotation into commodities in general. And I think we're starting to see the early stages of that with energy stocks and oil stocks. And so I expect a good year for uranium equities. Is it going to be the year where the sector really takes off? I don't know. That probably is going to be more like a 2022, but I think it's an excellent year to position. And I do think that it's going to be, if we hit that spot market target, if we hit high 30s, low 40s by the end of the year, then we're going to have a good year. Yeah.
So you think 2022 might be more like when we really start seeing the types of the moves?
It so much really depends on the utilities. It really depends on how they act this coming year. And I've said this for a couple of years now because they really have not participated in any sort of meaningful contracting cycle. They've continued to be able to buy up mobile inventory through carry trades and from the spot market, and to some extent short and midterm contracts from some of the producers, primarily Kazatomprom. But if the utilities step in some sort of meaningful volume this year, then I think we'll see a stronger move this year and a continuation into 2022. But I think that if they stay out of the market largely again, then I think this year will be a little less exciting and next year could be explosive.
Okay, so what do we need for them to start participating more? I mean, how many of these contracts are coming up on a percentile basis? How much longer can they hold off?
They can't. Well, the U.S. utilities in particular.
I like that sparkling water you were drinking too, by the way. That's
Topo Chico.
France, yeah.
I'll give an endorsement. Man, I love this stuff. I'm kind of addicted. It's the U.S. utilities are about 50% uncovered in contract deliveries out less than 3 years from now. So what that means is they need to start contracting pretty soon if they can't continue to bolster their inventories through spot market purchases and carry trades. So they're going to need to start doing some form of contracting to guarantee deliveries, assuming their plants will still be running, which almost all of them will be. There's a couple of planned shutdowns, but for the most part, most of these plants, some of them have gotten life extensions. So to the extent that they're uncovered out 2 years or more, they kind of need to start buying now. They have, at this point, we expect less than 2 years of inventory, which is historically a little bit on the low side. Can they draw that down further? Yes. Can they buy some material in the spot market? Yes. There's always material coming in, maybe 20 million pounds a year, I would guess, for in the spot market, primarily from BHP's Olympic Dam, and the Uzbeks sell into the spot market. And then there's a number of traders that trade from like Itochu out of Japan. They're a big trader and they trade Uzbek pounds. So there certainly is some supply that can continue to sort of buffer that, including inventory drawdowns, but it's not enough, and it's not enough to last that much longer. And we basically think that the bulk of the oversupply from the previous decade is to be worked through in 2021 based on our modeling. So we had a pretty big oversupply. I think we went over this the last time, so I won't beat it to death, but that material has largely kept the utilities out of the market because they've been able to do these carry trades with this excess mobile supply that's sitting at converters that the traders are able to move around. So that's been a big hindrance to the movement of the spot price. But I think we're very close to working through that. And with 180 million pounds of global consumption, and we've got last year was about a 50 million pound deficit. And this year it's expected to be 25, 30 million pounds, and even a deficit out next year, 2022, still 20 plus million pound deficit, which will stay at until MacArthur River is back online, which is going to be, Cameco has already stated they're not going to be announcing that restart this year. So if they announce it in 2022, that means 2023, they get 4 million pounds of production, and it's fully producing 2024. So what is it going to take? It's going to take somewhat of kind of a herd mentality. Bill Sheriff, the CEO of Encore Energy, he always likes to describe utilities as kind of herd animals, that they're sort of waiting for the first big utility, let's say an Exelon or a Duke, to come in and sign a long-term contract at a higher price. That'll be a major trigger for all of the rest of the utilities to sort of step up to the plate. It's either that or it's an actual supply scare, and that could also come from funds buying. So if news comes out at any point, that could be this year potentially, if there's hedge funds buying physical uranium, most of these guys that are fuel buyers now are old school guys. They remember the last market, and they got squeezed hard by the hedge funds. in the last market, and the potential for that to repeat is very high, and they have a good memory of that.
So, regarding these hedge funds, so basically we wouldn't find out until it's already been happening, maybe even been happening for a little, until like an average person like you or I would find out about it, because they're doing it obviously with the intention of secrecy and front running it and,
Sure.
and that. So is that was that accurate?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I mean, there might be kind of some insiders that might get that information leaked earlier than the general public, but yeah, we won't really know until it's happening.
Intuitively, do you feel that there are either previous players or new ones that recognize this is that type of situation as the last one, where they might be able to front run the utilities and do that?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's eyeballs on it right now.
And with the amount of liquidity in the world and the fact that they can borrow their money at nothing, I mean, it seems kind of like a no-brainer. And if you did it right, I mean, you could make way more money than you did last time, because the rates are at zero. I mean, you could literally corner the whole market and you probably wouldn't get assassinated like you would if you did that in the silver or gold market.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. I think it's going to be wise to watch for that later this year, because the purpose of Cameco and Kazatomprom buying in the spot market is to buy pounds cheaply, because they're selling it back into the market. The purpose for the funds to buy is to literally squeeze the market and to move the price up. So if they're buying while it's rising, that's a good sign for them. It means it's working. So we could very well see some quiet spot market action. Maybe it's going to tick up $1 or $2 in the next, let's say, quarter. And then if we start to see the price really move after that, then that would probably be a good hint that could be happening.
Interesting. So let me ask you, you're a pretty interesting guy, and I think you and I think a lot alike, whereas I'm sure you're passionate about uranium and you believe in the environmental components of it. And I know you've got children and the benefit of that, but I think we're similar in that, we look at this as an opportunity to really kind of escape the system and basically be able to buy your freedom right now in these extremely chaotic times that I think are really only getting going. What's your vision with your investing? Like, where do you see it taking you and going?
Yeah. I've never been asked that before. I mean, my personal vision is to secure my family financially, and honestly, my personal dream is to buy land and to build my own house. I mean, that's what I want to do. That's what I've wanted to do since I was very young. And I think that I don't know where that's going to be. I'm definitely watching, let's call it the political situation at the moment, with some very sincere concerns. And I mostly share your sentiment, I think, on where things are at and where they're going. I have a lot of concerns. But we're kind of watching, we're here in Southern California, and it's very populated, and the political situation here is a mess, and the state's a mess, but we love it here. We would really like to see things turn around and improve. So without being blindly optimistic, we're cautiously optimistic, but also with the idea of eventually buying land somewhere and building a house and being in kind of, homesteading. I mean, I used to farm a long time ago. And actually, when I was first starting to trade, I was farming at the same time. And I loved it. Doing it all by hand, and like an 1.5 acre organic farm. And that's something I'd love to get back to. So that's kind of my own personal goals is, secure myself and my family financially, and have the agency to move around at will or as needed.
Yeah, good stuff. Interesting. So what do you see yourself doing after this run? I mean, let's say that this is a great run. Do you see yourself retiring from the uranium industry, especially due to the cyclical nature of it, and going out and living your life? Do you see yourself finding new things that you want to invest in and help teach and prepare others in? Where do you see, what's your vision?
That's a good question. I definitely think I enjoy sort of an educational role. So I think that to the extent that I can educate myself and become, somewhat of an expert on any given field or any given sector, that I really enjoy the process of sharing and teaching to the extent that I'm able. So I think that I'll probably, as much as I love what uranium is all about, nuclear energy, it's more of an investment passion than it is, let's say, an environmental passion or an energy passion. I'm fascinated by the sector. I truly am. But it definitely is more of an investment interest. So I think when this sector peaks, there's going to be another opportunity after it. So I'll probably try to remain relevant somehow in the investing space, and we'll see where it goes. Yeah.
Interesting.
Whatever the opportunity is there, we'll see.
Yeah, good stuff, man. Yeah, I was just, from my own perspective, I was just kind of curious because I think a lot about, obviously the declining state of the world politically, socially, and economically. And, it makes me feel an urgency with my investments. And I often find myself either daydreaming or, more objectively kind of strategizing what I'm going to do. And so I was curious, how old are your kids?
I have a 16-year-old stepdaughter.
16-year-old stepdaughter. And when you explain uranium to her, obviously her stepdad has a kind of interesting job, kind of a unique one. Not very often do you meet a full-time uranium investor and a researcher of the subject. Right. When you're speaking to her or you meet her friends' parents, when you're talking to the average person that's unfamiliar, how do you describe uranium and the importance of uranium and the future role of uranium in our world?
I usually describe it as kind of a key component in clean energy. So to the extent that we have modern industrial civilization that's consuming electricity, that it's an undeniably good source of clean energy. And it usually gets into an explanation of kind of the misnomer about the waste. Yes, there is waste. Yes, we don't have a great solution for it, but it's minimal in quantity and it's highly, highly regulated. And so where, there's not a whole lot of coal waste, but that goes into the air and into the ocean and into our lungs. So it's a pretty easy sell on the clean energy front, but I usually get some strange looks, when I explain to people what I do. But it usually leads to an interesting conversation. Yeah. Yeah. And most people, to be honest, like if I say uranium, I have to immediately say for nuclear energy, because people typically often will associate it with, nuclear warfare.
Yeah, they think you work for the CIA or something.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so most people don't really know very much about it, and it's been really maligned, over the decades. So public sentiment, especially in the States, it's probably different in places like France. It's like in France, it keeps their air clean and their lights on, and here it's kind of like there's been a lot of negative propaganda, primarily funded by the oil and gas industry, because anytime you close down a nuclear plant, natural gas is there to pick up the pieces. So, yeah. Yeah.
So, how about this? In all likelihood, we have a incoming Democratic presidential administration. We do know that we have Democrats that won the House and the Senate. We do know that they're all Green New Deal and heavy on the renewable front. The Biden administration has stated, I just made a video about this because it has implications for silver. I think 10% of the USA energy comes from solar. They want it to be 50% within like 3 years, and obviously big implications for silver. But there's this, huge, almost delusional quality that they have where they want as fast as possible. Basically within 2-3 years, everything to go to renewable. How does this affect uranium, and how is uranium affected? Is there any difference between a democratic control of government versus, a split between Republicans and Democrats? Is it more bullish? Is it less bullish?
I would say it's less bullish, only because I feel like historically, and at least for the last 4 years, the Republicans have been more in support of nuclear energy than the Democrats. In fact, it's only recently that we're starting to see some rhetoric come out of the left in support of nuclear. But it seems, I have a feeling that will stick. It doesn't mean I'm necessarily bearish because of that, which I'm definitely not. Because really what matters is, are the plants running or are they not running? Yeah. So if we start to see forced shutdowns based on sentiment coming from the environmental left, that would be a bad thing for the sector.
That seems highly unlikely.
I don't think that's going to happen. Yeah, because I feel like regardless of the language and the unrealistic goals set by the Green Nuclear Deal, Freudian slip, Green New Deal, logic has to come into play at some point. So if we drastically increase the amount of solar feeding into the grid, the grids can only handle so much intermittent power feeding in at one time, because the baseload energy that has to cycle down to accommodate for the feeding in of that energy can only cycle down so much. So unless you have massive grid scale storage of solar or wind energy, you just can't achieve that level of solar in the grid, because you can't have the baseload power that's running 100% at nighttime cycle down to 50% during the day, unless it's all fossil fuels. And nuclear just can't cycle that much. It can cycle up and down, 10% maybe, but it's not a flip of a switch that is just going to go, down and up, down and up, down and up every single day as the sun rises and falls. So it's, I think that there's so much politics behind it more than there is genuine concern for the environment, in my personal opinion. And so we'll just have to see how it plays out. It's just going to be massive money printing, and more solar, I'm somewhat in favor of. I think that there's a place for solar. I think that there's room for more solar. I think rooftop solar makes sense. I think it's these gigantic solar power plants that don't make a lot of sense. And it's becoming more and more clear that existing nuclear plants that have run safely for decades and have life extensions for decades that are producing zero carbon energy, that's going to have to be adopted, because there's just going to be, if they've replaced nuclear with solar, there's going to be failures left and right on the grid.
Yeah, interesting. So if you had to pick right now, when do you think that we see a top in this market? Is it 2030? Is it 2025? Is it next week?
It's not next week. It's probably before 2030. The potential is there for this to be a more sustaining, longer-lived bull market. That potential exists, but like I said, it really depends on how things play out this year, especially with utility buying. Just the nature of this market lends itself towards major price spikes and price collapses on the other end of it. It takes so long to bring new production online. And so in order to meet the demands of the existing and the coming online reactors over the next decade, we need new mines beyond what's going to come back on care and maintenance, which is primarily MacArthur River and Langer Heinrich in Namibia. So those are the two big mines. Combined, there'll be about 25 million pounds, but that an additional 25 million pounds a year starting in 3 or 4 years doesn't get us to where we need to be towards the end of the decade. And the sector thinks way out into the future when supply in the short term starts to dry up, which we believe it is. So long story short, I would say if we have a price spike scenario, we should start to see the beginnings of that maybe later part of this year or next year. And I think that that could last for 1 to 2 years. So I think if we have a price spike, I would say the peak is probably 2023, maybe 2024. And if we have a more sustaining and supportive market by the utilities, we could see a slower rise and it could last longer, maybe by another couple of years, I would say. But it's very difficult to say. And well, before Fukushima, what happened in the ride up in 2007, the price peaked at $134, I believe it was spot price, and it dropped back down into the 40s, and then it started to recover again. It kind of made a higher low, and when it's getting back into a chugging along at a price that the market needed. And then Fukushima happened and killed all of that. So the potential is there for a longer market, but I'm shooting for somewhere around probably 3 to 4 years for the investment side of things, because even if it does come up and come back down and chug along higher, we probably still want to get out up near the top of that and maybe re-enter if the fundamentals say so.
Good stuff. So let's end here. So you're you're a researcher, you're analytical, strategic guy. A lot of interesting things happening in the world and especially in America right now. The UN reported that at least 250 million people have been pushed into poverty by the lockdowns. That was a UN, United Nations. Recently, I read a report that they estimate 50% of small businesses will never reopen again in America. There's obviously an overwhelming, we don't know the exact data, I don't think, but there's an overwhelming amount of people that are 8 or 9 months behind on their mortgage or rent. They just have not been able to be foreclosed upon or evicted. So we're in this really bizarre situation where there's a lot of people that maybe are either on the verge of bankruptcy or they are have had significant cuts to their income and financial stability. There's a lot of people that are unemployed. And then there's a lot of people that are listening right now that, they've managed pretty well. They're doing a pretty good job, but it's been a stressful time for them. What do you think are the most important things for us to be doing or thinking about, or tools or lifeboats, so to speak, life jackets, so to speak, for us financially, for ourselves, and for our loved ones right now, that are important parts for 2021, or at least things that that you're doing personally?
Yeah, those are pretty shocking statistics.
Yeah, it's not good.
It's really unfathomable what's happened this past year. It's very sad. I think that for myself and potentially what could be, I'll just tell you what I'm doing, and you can decide whether or not that's a good thing for most people to do. I'm doing everything I can to just take care of my immune system, regardless of how, of whether or not you agree or disagree with the lockdown measures that have happened. I do believe that there is a virus and it does exist, and it's definitely harmful to certain people with certain underlying conditions predominantly. And it seems to be a very discriminate virus. It's really interesting from what I've seen. So, and I'm not really in fear of it at all whatsoever. But either way, I try to keep my immune system high. So, I make my own elderberry tincture, which I take on a daily basis. I take vitamin C daily. I take vitamin D. I try to get exercise. I sit in the sun every single day if it's sunny, which most of the time it is here, luckily. And then on a financial front, I think that I don't know how soon things are going to go back to normal. And I'm not betting on them going back to normal anytime soon. So to the extent I mean, what I'm doing now has worked out well for me in this whole situation. I feel very fortunate for that. I think that if I owned a restaurant or worked in retail of some kind, or if I had an occupation or a skill set that requires life to go back to normal, I would at least start to shift and try to see which way the wind is blowing and make my way in the world based on that. I think being able to make an income from a computer and an internet connection is an unbelievable thing to shoot for. And I think it always has been, but even now is even more so. Being able to move around the world, I think, is an important ability. And I think just staying healthy, also just like trying to social media distance as much as possible, you know? I mean, I love Twitter for the investing community. I think Twitter might have committed suicide last week when they purged 5 million accounts, including the president of the United States. It's like I can't even believe what I'm seeing. It's absolutely unbelievable. But I love the investing community on Twitter. I'm going to remain there for that purpose alone. But the information onslaught is really overwhelming. So at least an hour a day, I shut everything off and go for a walk or just, get outside, try to maintain my mental health based on all the craziness that's constantly coming at me from social media and the media and everywhere else. So that's kind of my take and what I'm doing. How about yourself? Same question.
Same question. Pretty much the same answer. I mean, I go to the gym every single day. I'm not afraid of it. And you're starting to see even the people that were proponent of the lockdowns, Governor Cuomo said yesterday, basically, if you read the tweet, you would have thought Trump tweeted it,
Yeah.
And I think it's because he realizes that it has the potential to literally destroy hundreds of years of humanity's progress. And we're at that point. And I think my take is he's so psychopathic that he realizes how bad it is and he still wants to become president one day. And so he's trying to make a political shift. And so, that obviously is, terrible. But I agree with everything you said. I think the most important thing I've learned so far, and it was kind of dumb luck, but was starting a business on the internet. And I think it's one of the most important things we could do. I'm trying to increase my savings as much as I can. It's easy when there's so much going on, to kind of get out of some of the important rhythms or habits financially. Personally, I'm exploring leaving the United States. I think when I'm honest enough with myself, I can't see how it's not going to get substantially worse. And so I've been looking at other passports, Saint Kitts and Nevis, where you can get citizenship by investment for a family. I hate to say that I'm thinking about it and waste my time doing all this stuff thinking about it, but I'm not comfortable with what's happening. And, so looking at passports is another thing. And, trying to do the same thing as you. My goal is eventually, I would love to be able to retire from this precious metals and commodities market. My investments are primarily silver and uranium. And hopefully, for the large part, have a permanent social media distancing. I think spending my life on the computer is taking a little bit of maybe a toll on me, and I don't want to do it for 50 years. And so I'm excited about that, and that's why I started this channel, and why bringing someone who's as knowledgeable about uranium as you are and the asymmetrical benefits of it. And that was why I also asked you a little bit about your vision, because I'm curious. I'm really introspective on the future in my own life, and I'm curious someone else like you who is devoting himself to this commodities market, what your plans are.
Yeah, great. Well, you're rocking it, man.
So
you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It's exciting times. Well, we'll have you back on when we start to get a little bit more action. But I thought, for maybe some of the newer people that, obviously there's a percentage of the audience that watches these that are, they're your fans, and they're know so much depth about uranium. But I think we've also, through our interview, we introduced a lot of new people to the investment thesis. And now that they've kind of seen a little bit of a correction in the price, maybe they were a little unsure or confused. And so I thought it'd be a good time to have you back on and kind of set the stage a little bit.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Yeah, I think we're expecting a good year for sure.
So if you have not yet, Uranium Insider, right behind Justin's forehead right there, is uraniuminsider.com. And I'll put the description right at the top. I'll put the link right at the top of the description, rather, for you to go ahead and sign up. Very affordable and very valuable investment newsletter. If you are looking for an opportunity right now to ride a wave that I personally believe can probably give you financial liberty from either the political chaos or economic chaos of the world, or just the day-to-day rat race that you want to escape from, I think uranium is probably one of the best, if not the best, opportunity that we have over the next few years. And Justin's obviously one of the most knowledgeable people that you'll find on the internet. And so that's uraniuminsider.com. Link in the description right there down below to go ahead and sign up for that. And any parting words for us?
Well, I always enjoy talking with you. You have a great, just positive radiance about you. And even with all the chaos that's going on, it's nice to chat with somebody that can handle all of the negativity coming in and project just such positivity. It's awesome. So thanks for having me, and thanks for sharing my story and my investing thesis with your audience. I appreciate it. I think you said primarily silver and uranium. I'm in the same place. I think we're going to do well this year and beyond. So, yeah.
Amen. Well, I appreciate you saying that. I feel like I've lost a lot of my optimism just because being objective and honest enough with what's happening. Yeah. But I try to make this, especially this YouTube channel, and whenever I'm on video, it's one of the things that I like about video is we can transmit energy. And that's why I've always loved video. And so I do really appreciate you saying that a lot. And, unfortunately, there's a lot of things that we can't control right now in the world. And I think we're headed towards some historical cycles in government that have repeated themselves throughout human history. But there's also some exciting opportunities for us to be able to purchase our freedom right now. And uranium happens to be one of them, and let's just focus on trying to 10x our net worth over the next couple years in this, and let the rest of the shit fall where it may. So
right there with you. Let's do it.
All right, everyone. So make sure you hit the like button on this side right over there, this side right over there. Leave your questions down below, and we'll have Justin back on when we get a little bit more action here going on in the first quarter of this year. And if you have not yet, be sure to sign up for Uranium Insider.